Welcome back to CIA Declassified. Imagine it is 1963. The air in Mexico City is thin, crisp, and heavy with the scent of street food and exhaust. But beneath the vibrant exterior of this cosmopolitan hub lies the most active intelligence battleground in the Western Hemisphere. Mexico City was a neutral ground where the Soviet Union, Cuba, and the United States maintained massive diplomatic presences within blocks of each other. It was a city of wiretaps, double agents, and high-stakes surveillance. At the center of this web was a specific designation, a focal point for every thread of intelligence moving between the Americas and the Iron Curtain. This was a time when the Cuban Revolution was still a fresh wound and the Bay of Pigs was a haunting memory. This was the agency's crown jewel in the South. This was Bond. How did this station get its name? The designation Bond was assigned as the station cryptonym for Mexico City during the peak of the Cold War. The reason for the name lies in the agency's geography group naming conventions of the era. The Mexico City station was viewed as the literal bond or primary adhesive link between the CIA's domestic operations and its vast networks across Latin America. It served as the jurisdictional bridge, the bond, that allowed intelligence gathered in the North to be operationalized in the South and vice versa. It was the glue that held the regional strategy together. Bond was not just an office, it was a sprawling, multi-layered intelligence machine. The Bond Station was the largest CIA outpost in the Western Hemisphere outside of the United States, operating with a budget that rivaled many European stations. A quote from Wynne Scott, the chief of the station: "Mexico City is the one place on Earth where we can observe the enemy in his natural diplomatic habitat without the restrictions of a war zone." End quote. Records show that Bond managed a massive wiretapping program codenamed Lienvoy, or Lie. I guess it is Lienvoy, Lienvoy, which intercepted thousands of hours of telephone conversations from the Soviet and Cuban embassies. Documentation confirms that Bond utilized photographic surveillance posts hidden in apartments across from enemy compounds, using high-powered cameras to log every visitor. The station operated a program called Lie Tempo, which involved maintaining direct paid relationships with the highest levels of the Mexican government, including future presidents. A quote from a declassified 1963 progress report: "Our access to the local security apparatus through Lie Tempo ensures that the Bond station can operate with near total immunity." End quote. Bond served as the primary transport point for Lee Harvey Oswald just weeks before the assassination of John F. Kennedy, where his movements were tracked by station assets. Logs indicate that Bond utilized double agent runs where Soviet defectors were repackaged and sent back into their embassies to feed misinformation to Moscow. The agency established shell companies in Mexico City to launder the operational funds used to support anti-communist movements throughout Central America. Technical files reveal that Bond was a testing ground for invisible ink communications, allowing agents to pass messages through the public postal system without detection. The station maintained a 24-hour Special Intelligence Service link with the Mexican DFS to coordinate the snatching of suspected Soviet couriers off the street. A quote from a declassified 1964 internal memo: "The proximity of the Soviet and Cuban installations in this capital creates a unique cross-pollination of intelligence targets." End quote. Bond pioneered the use of transistorized bugs hidden in gifts given to foreign diplomats, such as desk sets and picture frames. Documentation proves the agency operated an unmarked observation van disguised as a local laundry service to monitor the Cuban consulate's rear entrance. The station recruited local hotel staff to search the luggage of visiting Eastern Bloc trade delegations during their stay in Mexico City. Records indicate that Bond intercepted Soviet diplomatic pouches by staging accidental delays at the airport in coordination with Mexican customs officials. The CIA utilized safe house apartments in the Polanco district to conduct interrogations of defectors away from official diplomatic eyes. Bond managed the Operation Tilt assets, which were involved in maritime raids against Cuban targets from Mexican waters. Internal ledgers show the payment of monthly stipends to Mexican journalists to plant pro-U.S. stories in major newspapers. A quote from a declassified security briefing: "Control of the local narrative is as important as the intercept of a cable. Bond manages both with equal precision." End quote. The station utilized pulse code modulation for its secure lines back to Langley to prevent Mexican or Soviet eavesdropping. Bond oversaw the installation of seismic sensors near the Soviet embassy to track the movement of heavy machinery or potential tunneling. Documentation reveals the use of honey traps, where agency-recruited socialites were used to compromise and recruit high-ranking Soviet attachés. The station ran a counter-surveillance school for local Latin American intelligence officers to standardize agency techniques across the continent. A quote from a declassified 1967 operational review: "Bond has become the headquarters of the South, a central node for all hemispheric clandestine activity." End quote. Records prove that Bond agents used infrared photography to capture meetings taking place in unlit parks during the dead of night. The agency maintained a black budget for Bond that was buried within the U.S. Department of Agriculture's regional aid accounts. Bond coordinated the extraction of defectors via unmarked private planes flying out of small, unmonitored airstrips in the Mexican desert. The station utilized voice stress analysis software in its early stages to vet the reliability of local informants. Records show that Bond infiltrated the local postal sorting facility to intercept and photograph mail addressed to the Cuban embassy. The station placed microtransmitters inside the official vehicles of the Soviet ambassador by bribing the embassy's local mechanics. Station logs revealed the use of stationary observation posts hidden within the U.S. Embassy's secret library to monitor high-altitude signals. Records confirm Bond utilized thermal imaging prototypes to determine which rooms in the Soviet compound were occupied by security personnel versus diplomats. Documentation shows that the agency recruited local bank managers to provide copies of financial transactions made by known Cuban intelligence front companies. Ledgers indicate that Bond provided logistical support for the transport of U-2 reconnaissance film from Mexico City to the United States. The agency operated mobile surveillance bicycles equipped with hidden radios to navigate the congested traffic. Records prove the station utilized sub-audio taps on regional telegraph lines to intercept traffic moving towards Central America. Internal memos show the creation of dummy diplomatic passports to move agency assets through Mexican immigration without creating a paper trail. The Bond station funded anti-communist student unions at the National Autonomous University of Mexico, UNAM, to counteract Soviet recruitment. If you review the declassified Bond archives today, the heaviest and most frustrating redactions are found in the series titled Lienvoy, Oswald Transcripts, Volume 4. This section contains the most redactions in the entire declassified history of the operation, blacking out nearly 80% of the content regarding late September 1963. Some dark corner researchers dive deep into these black bars and emerge with a chilling theory. There was a third party inside the embassy. Speculation suggests the Bond cameras didn't just see Lee Harvey Oswald. They captured him in the company of a high-level KGB assassination specialist specialist from the notorious Department 13. The theory is that the agency's redactions are a desperate attempt to hide the fact that they saw the mechanic of a presidential hit and let him walk right out the front door. If you want to talk about political puppet mastery, look at the lie tempo redactions. There's a loud group of theorists who believe the agency installed Mexican presidents by a massive electoral fraud managed right out of the Bond station. The conspiracy theory claims the blacked out files are a literal price list for the Mexican elite, and the redactions are there to protect the modern political dynasties that still rule today thanks to CIA rigged ballots. Technophiles have a different take on the silence. They speculate that Bond was the test site for a ground-to-air signal intercept array. The theory goes that the redactions hide blueprints for a giant secret antenna hidden in the U.S. Embassy roof designed to sniff the data from early Soviet spy satellites. They believe the agency is still hiding a breakthrough in physics that allowed them to crack orbit-to-ground transmissions in the 60s. A more localized rumor suggests that Win Scott wasn't the real power at Bond. Speculation exists that the redactions hide the existence of a Station Zero chief, a shadow operative who lived in Mexico for 30 years under a false identity and truly ran the Lie Tempo network. The theory suggests this person was never officially an employee, and the redactions are the only way to keep a legendary deep cover ghost from being hauntable. Lately, a fringe theory has emerged from the signals intelligence community. They speculate that the heaviest redactions in the technical annexes hide the use of experimental time dilation radios. The conspiracy posits that the Bond station was experimenting with a way to slow down radio waves to intercept Soviet transmissions before they actually happened, a sort of precognitive signals intelligence. They argue the redactions protect a secret branch of science that the agency considers a matter of existential security. Was the Bond station a success? Tactically, it was an intelligence goldmine. It successfully provided a 24/7 window into the heart of the Soviet and Cuban diplomatic missions. Strategically, it was a geopolitical anchor. The program was a success because it allowed the U.S. to maintain a sphere of influence in Latin America during the most volatile years of the Cold War. The success of Bond is measured in the dozens of potential coups and uprisings that were identified and neutralized before they could begin. It proved that deep state alliances with local governments were more effective than open military intervention. The station successfully created a blueprint for how the agency would operate in third country environments for the next 50 years. It was a categorical success in turning a neutral capital into a private laboratory for American espionage. By utilizing the Lie Tempo, L-I-T-E-M-P-O, it might also be L-I Tempo, U.S. interest without the need for a single soldier on the ground. By utilizing the Lie Tempo network, the CIA successfully created a shadow government in Mexico that served U.S. interest without the need for a single soldier on the ground. The longevity of the station's influence is the ultimate testament to its success in weaving American interest into the very fabric of Mexican national security. It was a success that literally redefined the backyard policy of the United States. And beyond that, it successfully professionalized the Mexican intelligence apparatus, turning it into a proxy of the agency that continued to function even after the station's budget was reduced. The operational success of Bond ensured that Mexico remained a stable, albeit compromised, buffer zone during the nuclear brinksmanship of the era. It was, by every metric of Cold War clandestine tradecraft, a resounding and absolute triumph of the agency's vision for Latin America. As far as technological and operational breakthroughs go, the Southern Gateway resulted in breakthroughs that define modern global intelligence, such as multi-channel telephonic interception. The Leanvoy, which again, that one also may be L-I Envoy, That system's ability to tap hundreds of lines simultaneously is the direct ancestor of modern mass data collection and signals intelligence used by agencies globally. High-resolution, long-distance optical surveillance, the techniques used to photograph embassy visitors from blocks away, led to the development of modern satellite imaging sensors that can read a license plate from orbit. Biometric identity verification, bond assets pioneered the use of gait analysis and facial proportion logging to identify spies in disguise, techniques now used in AI-driven security cameras at every major airport. And clandestine financial layering. The use of Mexico City as a clearinghouse for covert funds led to the modern techniques of financial tracking used to identify money laundering in international banking. Bond reminds us that the most important battles of the Cold War weren't fought with tanks, but with cameras and microphones. The Southern Gateway was a project that turned a city of millions into a house of mirrors. The agency proved that in the thin air of Mexico City, the truth was as elusive as a shadow at noon. The tapes have stopped spinning and the safe houses have been sold, but the influence of the Bond station remains etched into the history of the Americas. We are still living in the world that Win Scott and his team built, a world where the bond between two nations is often forged in the dark. The footprints left by the Bond station are visible in every modern diplomatic interaction across the southern border. It is a legacy of surveillance that continues to define the boundaries of privacy and power in the Western Hemisphere. Every lens that stares at a border crossing today carries the DNA of the Mexico City station. Thanks for listening. Stay safe, and remember, someone is always watching the courtyard. Join us next time as we examine L.C. Pangs. In the quiet offices of The Economist, the agency found a way to topple regimes without firing a single bullet. We'll uncover the facts behind L.C. Pangs, the designation for operations to induce potential instability through economic sabotage. It was a game of numbers, markets, and the brutal reality of a collapsing kitchen table. Join us next time for The Paper War. In the meantime, I'll see you in the archives.